Be the envy of the neighborhood. 860 KKAT, where the grass is always greener. Welcome to Gardening Utah. Here's composter and show hoster, Jana Francis.
Welcome to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis. Every week here on Gardening Utah, we give you gardening inspiration and advice from experts across the state. We talk about vegetables, flowers, trees, shrubs, and of course, your lawn. Thank you for listening. I hope this show is something that you'll look forward to checking in with every week. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, Gardening Utah aims to inspire you and keep you in the know of what tasks you should be accomplishing in your yard and meet amazing, informative experts along the way. This show airs on the radio on the weekends here in Utah at 10 a.m. on 860 AM KKAT, and episodes drop every weekend on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. On today's show, you will learn all kinds of interesting water conservation tips and tricks that you may not have ever thought of. In fact, we've got Eric Marble from Chanshare Sod Farms back, and he's going to tell us what not to do when watering your lawn and yard. And he's going to give us some really interesting tips that you may not have ever thought of with regard to water conservation. And in fact, little Miss me, who is little Miss always wanting to conserve water, learned a few things myself that I had never thought of. So I'm already implementing these things, and I can't wait for you guys to hear them. So as you know, two of the things I'm very passionate about is water conservation, and another one is bees. And speaking of bees, here is my tip of the week.
860 KKAT with your Gardening Utah tip of the week.
My tip of the week is how to detect damage from leafcutter bees and how to protect them. Now, leafcutter bees are the cutest little bees. They are solitary, they're gentle, and they're important native pollinators. But the damage they do to our broadleaf deciduous plants are often confused with strawberry root weevil damage. Leafcutter bees will damage roses, lilacs, Virginia creepers, ash, or really any broadleaf deciduous plant or tree. In my yard specifically, my beautiful weeping redbud and my normal columnar redbud tree. However, it is very important not to spray or put any sort of chemical out to prevent these leafcutter bees because they are very important pollinators. Now, the way you can tell it's leafcutter bee damage is they will cut and they will remove like the perfect circles from a leaf. So it's about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. Some are oval and curvy shapes, and some are perfect circles. What they do is they take these pieces of leaf away and they use them to construct egg chambers out of these leaves, and then they cap it off with that perfect circle. Meanwhile, they're pollinating plants and they're filling the egg chambers with nectar and pollen. And once these are in place, the female leafcutter places one single egg atop the food that she's gathered, and then she caps that cell off with that circular piece of a leaf. And she may construct as many as 20 of these pollen-filled bee-ritos is what you see them called online, which is so cute, and it's exactly what they look like. Somehow they wrap up these little leaves into the perfect little bee-rito. It looks like a little burrito filled with a bee before she's done. Now, leafcutter bees are active in late June and July, but listen, their damage is aesthetic. And so we really need to tolerate leaf-cutting bees and make sure that we're not putting any poison out to really harm our pollinators. So my tip of the week is make sure that if you're seeing damage on any of your rose leaves or your lilacs, try to be clear whether it is leafcutter bee damage or strawberry root weevil damage. And if it's leafcutter, try to avoid doing any sort of prevention because, again, they are very important native pollinators. And if you would like to see how adorable and cute they are, there are so many YouTube videos of little leafcutter bees hatching out of these little bee-ritos. And let me tell you, when you see one, you're going to love them forever. Even if they do create circle shapes right out of the leaves of your favorite redbud tree.
And that's your Gardening Utah Tip of the Week, brought to you by The Advocates. If you're in an accident, you deserve an advocate. Call 801-355-5550 or visit utahadvocates.com. Never miss a tip for your garden and never miss an episode. The Gardening Utah Podcast with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
But seriously, though, you need to Google it. You need to Google leafcutter bee burrito and watch one of these leafcutter bees come out of this little capsule. It's pretty amazing. So now when I look at the pencil head sized holes in my beautiful favorite weeping redbud tree, I think of the cute little leafcutter bee and how hard that native pollinator bee is working to pollinate our plants and vegetables, which is so important. And I just let it go right over my head. I let it be because, again, it's just aesthetic damage. Okay. All right. I'm going to talk about our contest. Don't forget, there's just 2 more times that you can enter to win a 4x8 raised garden box from Q&R Box Gardens. If you've wanted to get your raised garden boxes going in your backyard, it's the perfect time. Head on over to KKAT's website. It's 860kkat.com. Click the contest button and it will take you right to where you just quickly enter to win. And we pick a winner every single month and Q&R Box Gardens delivers it to your house. How could that be any better than that? Seriously. So make sure to check that out. Also, if you just want a link to it, you can go to our episode notes in Apple Podcast or wherever you're listening to this podcast. You can click right to the contest link. And also you can click links to lots of different things. I've talked about deals quite a bit on the show. So we've got some coupon codes in there for you where you can click through to different vendors and have a look at what they have for sale and get a Gardening Utah discount. How cool is that? Speaking of, I was planting a lot this last week, and there is a tool that I will link in our episode notes. It's kind of like an auger, if you will, but it's like a mini one, and it attaches to, maybe this is like completely a no-brainer for everyone else, and you've been using this for years, but this is so new to me, and I'm obsessed with it. So it's like a drill. You attach this little piece to your actual drill, as long as it's, battery powered, and dig holes in the ground. And it is so fast to just like quick drill and get your hole dug. And it's amazing. So I will put a link to the one that I have in the episode notes and you can head on over and check out that. But I'm telling you what, total lifesaver for me, for sure, in getting as many plants as I need to get in the ground dug with, minimal time and minimal effort. Quick plug for our Instagram page. If you're not following us over at Gardening Utah, which is our handle, you ought to go there. You can check out what's growing on in my garden. I love to repost things that are happening all over Utah. Cool events, cool sales at places like J&J and Cactus and Tropicals and lots of fun nurseries. So definitely go check it out. We are at Gardening Utah. And oh, by the way, today, I want to try something a little bit different. I've got Cameron Alcott that's going to give us sort of like a plant of the week. So we're going to let him finish this segment before our next break with a cool plant that he just, has a handful of left, but he wanted to talk about it on the show. So we're going to head to him next, and then we'll be back after the break with Eric Marble from Chanshare Sod Farms. And I promise you will learn a water conservation tip that you didn't know before. Take it away, Cameron.
Hey, Jana, thanks for having me back on. Hey, real quick, I wanted to talk about Straight Talk Privet. It is my new favorite privacy shrub that is out there. It is deciduous, so it does lose its leaves, but it is so elegant looking during the season. Like you cannot see through it. It has small leaves. It's really dense, looks very formal. And what's even better about it is it has like more of a tapered base. So you can actually put some colorful flowers on there or some hydrangeas. Roses look really good. It makes a really good backdrop to show off whatever is in front of it while simultaneously giving you privacy. It is absolutely fantastic. I love it. It gets about 12 feet tall, 2 to 4 feet wide, and you can find it at progressiveplants.com. If you just put in Straight Talk in the search engine, you can find it and get yours today.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. Gardening Utah. Available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden. Here's Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and today we have none other than Eric Marble from Chanshare Sod Farms with us. We're going to be discussing the obvious in Utah, the elephant in the room, the drought. Welcome,
dun,
Eric.
Dun. Sometimes it feels like we're on the surface of the sun, but here in Utah, everything's good.
I kind of felt like that the last week with this crazy temperatures that, it's one thing to have 104 degrees in late August or whenever we're used to it and acclimated to it.
Yeah.
But in June, come on.
I know. Like yesterday, it was down to where I'm at. It was like 85, 90 degrees. And I was just like, woohoo! That's a cool day.
Right? So thanks you so much for being on the show today because, with all the talk right now about lawn care and how that's changing in a drought and, water shaming and the whole bit, there's a lot of polarizing opinions. And I thought, let's just bring in the expert and really tell Utah and give them really good instructions on move forward plans with our situation.
Yeah, Jana, I am so glad to be on here to be able to talk about this because there really is, like you said, it's polarizing right now. And we see in the news, like yesterday, the last couple of days, I've seen headlines like lawn is becoming a 4-letter word. And should we enact laws like Nevada in, taking out lawn areas? And, we're a different climate and a different place than Nevada is. And really, if people are using correct principles in maintaining their lawns and their landscapes, then you can conserve water and still have this functional landscape that is beautiful and offers you a quality of life that's better than other places. And so I'm really excited to talk about that. And like the water shaming thing too, I don't know how I feel about that. Definitely if I had a neighbor that was watering every day in the heat of the day, I would probably go over and talk to that neighbor and just say, hey, here's some resources. Go to Chanshare's website or go to the Water Slow the Flow website and take a look at some of those because there's better ways to maintain your landscape than wasting water this way. But, some people may not have that kind of a relationship with their neighbors. I just personally think it's so much better to have a conversation than to try and shame somebody into compliance.
Right. Especially on social media too. I've noticed, people will post, hey, how do you like my front flowers? And people will see that there's a green lawn and go, oh, really? How much are you watering? You're wasting water. I can't believe you're doing that right now. And
but that's the thing. Like you really can't tell whether a person is wasting water on their lawn or not by how green it is. It's really the maintenance practices that they do that allow it to be green or not. Like I've got one guy that works for Chanshare and he's doing, so Chanshare is one of the biggest sod suppliers in the state, but so we know lawns.
Yes.
We take care of lawns. And one of the guys that works with us, he's experimenting all the time on his lawn. And in the heat of the summer, he puts on less than an inch of water and his lawn is the greenest, most verdant lawn that I have ever seen. Now, most homeowners in Utah put somewhere between 50 to 100 inches of water on their lawn in a full year. And that's like twice as much as you really need. And so, again, if you're doing good maintenance practices, you can really have a green lawn and a beautiful landscape without wasting water. And I think that's really the message that should be put out there rather than we need to take these drastic measures. Because if each one of us does just a little bit, 1 or 2 things to save a couple gallons an hour, then we make this huge impact throughout the state and we can conserve water and we can preserve our way of life as well. And so hopefully today, the things that we talk about will allow people to do that type of thing.
So Eric, one thing that I've noticed as a theme throughout the years, obviously we live in a desert and, Utah's always with the Slow the Flow campaign and some other things, we're always trying to find ways to conserve water. So I feel like in a way, some people may not be realizing the situation we are actually in and why it's different. Tell us about that.
Yeah, certainly. It kind of feels like this year drought has kind of crept up on us, and all of a sudden it's this huge thing. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. Like, we've had a couple of winters and a couple of summers that have been extraordinarily dry. And usually what happens in a normal year is we get enough precipitation that it fills up the soil moisture. And then after the soil moisture is filled up, then we get runoff. And runoff goes into the rivers, which then supply the reservoirs. And then from those reservoirs, we're able to supply water to our population. Now, reservoirs in Utah have a 2-year supply of water. So if we have 2 back-to-back years that are really, really dry, then we're still okay. We still have enough water. But what happens is if that soil moisture content goes super low, then you don't get the runoff. For instance, right now, Pineview normally has about 220,000 gallons of water a day runoff in a normal year. But because soil moisture content is so low right now, they're only getting about 7,000 gallons of water a day. So 7,000 compared to the 220,000, like, that's why all of a sudden it's like we're into this really dire situation where we need to bump up our game as far as conserving water goes.
Yeah. In fact, I was just speaking with somebody yesterday that lives near Jordanelle, and he just said, I cannot believe how different it is and how low it is right now.
Yeah, it visibly, you go by any of the reservoirs in Utah, and they're all the same way. They're all at historic low levels right now. And that's because of that. And so, we're not at risk in Utah of having water that we need yet. And the great thing about it is that every gallon that we conserve stays in those reservoirs, so that if we have a continued prolonged drought, that we're still going to be okay. But you know what? There's little things that each one of us can do in order to in order to help that situation. And like I said, every gallon that you save is a gallon that stays in those reserves, so that we can protect ourselves against the future. So, some of the headlines that I've seen were asking whether we should be like Nevada and enact these laws about ornamental lawns and stuff like that. And I think that there's more that you've got to think about than just lawn areas. Plants don't waste water, people do. And so, the things that we can do as humans to prevent wasting water are, to me, it's intuitive because I've been around it for so much, but to other people, it may not. But when we start thinking about taking out greenscapes, then we got to think about the unintended consequences as well. One thing to think about is a 2,000 square foot lawn uses a specific amount of water, but also a 2,000 square foot lawn will supply enough oxygen for 4 adults every day. So the greenscapes that you take out affect more than just water. They affect ambient temperature. If you have a hardscape around a house, it increases the temperature of the house. Whereas if you've got a lawn or a greenscape in there, then it decreases the amount or the air temperature there. And then also it increases your quality of living if you're using it functionally. So, there's things like that you need to think about as well. So even as we think about conservation, that may be a part of it. A part of it may be making your landscape more functional so that you're not wasting water. But a big part of it, and the major part of it, I would say, is the way that you maintain those greenscapes, and especially the way that you water and maintain your lawn, because that can produce so much better conservation efforts, and then also a better effect on our living environment as well.
Absolutely.
As we go forward, I've got so much information, and you guys, this is going to be like drinking from a fire hose, which I love that analogy right now because we're in a drought. So grab a pen and some paper so you can write some of these things down, because there's so much information that we're going to go over. Okay, so I've got 5 things that you definitely should not be doing. If you're doing these, then you're wasting water, okay? So, and we're going to focus on lawns because I'm a lawn guy, right? But number 1, do not water in the middle of the day. It's the best times to water is from 6 p.m. to 10 a.m. And the reason why is because in the middle of the day, when the heat gets so high, there's a lot more evaporation that comes. And then on top of that, if you're living close to the side of the mountain, you get a lot of wind that comes in the morning or the morning or late afternoon, and that can cause the direction of your water spray to be off. So do not water in the middle of the day. 6 p.m. to 10 a.m., that's when you should set all of your cycles to water, okay? Next thing is do not water every day. If you're watering every day, your lawn may look green, but it's one of the most unhealthy lawns that you've got in the neighborhood. And the reason why is because it only gets water on the surface of, or the top half inch of the soil. And so your lawn is lazy. It's not going to push those roots down in to chase the water if it's sitting there on the top half inch. It's like somebody who's sitting on the couch watching the TV. If you bring them food all the time, they don't even have a reason to get up. So they're just going to sit and wait for the food to come, right? So same thing there. Do not water every day. If you're watering every day, then you're wasting water. And there's better ways to maintain your lawn. The next thing is don't mow your lawn less than 2 inches. And especially in the middle of the summer. If you're mowing short, evaporation increases. Your plants don't have a reason to push those roots deeper into the soil because they don't have a leaf that's longer to support. And then on top of that, you're cutting it too frequently, which puts the grass into shock, which then requires more water and fertilizer and everything in order to rebuild itself. So do not mow your lawn less than 2 inches. The next thing, don't fertilize more than 4 times a year. 4 times a year should be completely sufficient. And 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet is more than sufficient to have a green lawn throughout the year. And then the last tip that I would say, do not water your stations the same amount, because each station is going to have a different water requirement, and each station is going to have an individual time period for your irrigation schedules. So those are some things that you should not do. Absolutely not. If you're doing any of those things, then you're wasting water.
I absolutely love it. These are things that anyone can do, right?
Yeah. And it's super easy. Like, don't water in the middle of the day. Just change your watering cycle, like change your timer on your automatic sprinkler system, and watering every day. Just don't. Like, I'll talk to you a little bit later on about like how much you should water and how long you should water and stuff like that. But again, if you're watering every day, you're creating a lazy lawn. We don't want lazy lawns.
No, we do not. We don't want couch potato lawns. Well, let's get into that, what you just mentioned, right after this break. So we'll be right back with Eric Marble from Chanshare Sod Farms right here on Gardening Utah. Stay with us.
860 KKAT with Jana Francis and Gardening Utah, where it's always mulch time. She really does have the nicest yard on the block. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and with me today is Eric Marble from Chanshare Sod Farms. So we're getting the ins and outs on everything we need to do to conserve water this year, more importantly than ever. And Eric, we were talking about sprinkler systems, and there's some things you need to do to really optimize. So walk us through some of those tips.
Right. So, we're going to talk about conservation now. Like, we've talked about the things not to do. So now we're going to talk about the things to do. And as we talk about conservation, the first thing you would think that we would talk about is water, but we need to actually start talking about your irrigation system. So your sprinkler system is kind of one of the first things that you need to think about. And most people, like, they want to just turn on their sprinklers in the spring, set it and forget it, and then turn them off in the fall. But if you're doing that, again, you're wasting water that way, because in different temperatures, in different seasons, your grass is going to grow differently. So we're going to start by talking about the sprinkler system. But before we talk about the specifics of the lawn and watering, I want to talk about, again, something that you can do that's pretty easy as far as your sprinkler system goes. And that is just doing a regular inspection of your sprinkler system. So like once you turn your sprinklers on in the spring, usually most people will go around and they'll check and they'll make sure that the heads are facing the right way and that there's nothing broken, and that there's no leaks and stuff like that. And that's great. You're supposed to do that. But then they don't check again, and then they turn their sprinklers off in the fall. But what happens, like, you got pets and you got people running on the lawn and stuff like that. And so they can move the sprinkler head, or they can knock it over, or they can damage it. And so regular inspections of your sprinkler system are important. So when you're checking your sprinkler system, here are some things that you need to look at. First of all, check so that the heads are spraying in the right direction and that they're not overspraying or underspraying. A sprinkler system should reach head to head, which means that the one head should spray to the next head. And so check that your heads are spraying in the right direction and that they're spraying far enough. The next thing is check that your heads are straight and not pushed over. Because if they're leaning forward too far, then what's going to happen is it's going to spray right around that sprinkler head, but it's not going to spray the whole area that it's supposed to get. So sometimes you'll see somebody's lawn and right around the sprinkler head, it's really green, but then the farther it gets away from that sprinkler head, the less color you've got in the lawn. And that's a sure indication that your sprinkler head is facing downward a little bit. It's not facing straight up. And if you're on on a slope, you want that sprinkler to match the degree of the slope, so that again, you've got an even coverage as that sprinkler goes from side to side, and that it covers that whole area. The next thing is you want to check to make sure that each of the heads aren't broken and that they're spraying properly. If they're broken, a lot of times you'll see water leaking out of the top when it's closed or when that section isn't on. And then with that, you also want to look for leaks along the line or near the bottom of the heads. That's generally where you're going to get your most leaks. And an easy way to tell that again is if the soil is if it's wetter close to the sprinkler head, if it's not as firm close to the sprinkler head, then generally you could have a little bit of a leak towards the bottom of where that sprinkler head is. Another thing to look at is that there's no high vegetation that's preventing effective coverage. Okay. So if you've got grass that's growing really tall right in front of where that sprinkler head is, it's not going to be able to get the whole thing. Or if you've got an area of your yard that has ornamental grasses or other trees or whatever, it may be preventing that sprinkler head from getting the whole area. And so check to make sure that that's not happening. And then the last thing to check on your sprinkler system is that that heads aren't sunken too low for proper coverage. Because a lot of times after you put that sprinkler system in, if that head settles, the soil settles around that head, then that head will drop below where it's supposed to be. It should be right at the level of the grass, or just above the level of the grass, so that it can reach above once that sprinkler head pops up and it can spray that whole thing. So those are what you need to check on your sprinkler system. And I would recommend that you check them monthly or more often than that.
I couldn't agree more on checking often, because I'll tell you what, especially, at the beginning of the season, you might think, okay, I've got it totally dialed, right? And maybe you run through all those steps that you just mentioned, which I'm thinking through. My husband definitely does that. And what also happens is we get the overgrowth from maybe my hostas explode, and some of them unknowingly will start blocking a sprinkler head. So really we just kind of we do have so much growth in our yard that gets close to our sprinklers that it's an every Sunday thing. My husband will just quickly run his own for just a second and have a look to see what we need to cut back to make sure that the sprinkler has that perfect line to where it's supposed to be going.
Definitely. And, that comes back to landscaping as well. When you're creating your landscape or adjusting your landscape, your lawn area, you should have just a big open area without any obstructions in the middle of it. So don't put a tree in the middle of your lawn. Don't put like the traditional bean in the middle that has, flowers and stuff in it. Yeah. I mean, you can do that and that's okay. As long as your sprinkling system is getting only the lawn area, the zones are getting only the lawn area, because a single zone, if it covers a lawn area and a garden area, I mean, they're going to have different requirements as far as water goes. And so if you're on the same zone for both of those, then you're not really going to be able to water efficiently.
Yeah. I mean, it's so bad for trees and shrubs to get overspray, drip is the way to go. And yeah, it's just totally different requirements from the lawn to your planting areas.
Yeah. definitely. So next thing to talk about, it's important to know how much water your system is outputting in each station, because again, each station is going to have a different output and a different water requirement too. Stations are affected by different things like water pressure, time of day, the efficiency of the system as well. And so those are some things to think about. Whenever you're measuring how much water your irrigation system is doing, it's best to do that at the same time of day that you're going to be doing your irrigation. And the reason for that is if you're doing it at the same time all your neighbors are, your water pressure is going to be a little bit different. And so the output's going to be different, right?
Oh,
and
interesting.
So
yeah.
I know it's a pain in the butt, especially if I'm telling you not to water until the middle of the night. But you really, if you want to have an accurate measurement of how much water your system is putting out, you need to measure that at the same time that you're regularly applying the water.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Now, an easy way for you to figure out how much water your system is outputting is to take like a tuna can or a catfish can. That's about an inch deep. Set it in the middle of a zone and then run your zone until that can is full. And that'll tell you how long it takes for you to put 1 inch of water on your lawn. And then you can break up your cycles to put that 1 inch of water on in a week. Now, right now in Utah, Governor Cox has said that state agencies are not supposed to water between 6 p.m. and 10, or are supposed to water between 6 p.m. and 10 a.m., which we just talked about in the last segment. And then also they're not supposed to water more than 2 times a week. And you know what? Those are so great. And you can actually do that and have a green lawn if you're doing these correct principles, if you're building that root base and watering deeply. So half an inch every cycle and then two cycles a week, it should be more than sufficient for you to keep a green lawn. Again, we talked about how to figure out how long it takes to do that 1 inch. Do that in each of your zones to figure out how much pressure you've got in the zones and how long it takes those. A good rule of thumb, though, if you have rotor heads sprinklers apply approximately ½ inch per hour. Oh. So, and then spray heads actually apply 1.5 inches per hour. Aha. So if you're only, you should not ever put more than 1 inch of water per week on your lawn. Even in the heat of the summer. So if you've got a rotor head and you don't have time to figure out how long it takes to fill up that tuna can, again, rotor heads about ½ inch per hour and spray heads are about 1.5 inches per hour. So you can use those to adjust your times if you're not able to dial that in correctly. Okay, so explain for our listeners what a rotor head looks like. So a rotor head, it pops up and then it rotates back and forth. And then the spray head pops up and it just sprays. And so we've got a combination of both in our lawn. So that adds a little bit of extra complication, doesn't it? Yeah. So again, if you've got a zone that has both of those on it, set that tuna can right in the center of your 2 heads and then figure out how long it takes to fill up that tuna can. Yeah. And then you can go from there to figure out how many minutes you need in order to put on a ½ inch. Again, ½ inch, 2 times a week should be more than sufficient to keep a green lawn. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we'll be right back right after this with more from Eric Marble with Chanshare Sod Farms on Gardening Utah. Stay with us.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. 860 KKAT with more of the fastest growing show on radio. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis. Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, hanging out here with Eric Marble with Chanshare Sod Farms. We're talking maintenance on your lawn, ways that you can have a green lawn even in a drought. And I'm loving all these tips and tricks, Eric. I hope our listeners are taking notes. And listen, I'm going to be putting as many that I can in our episode notes here, as well as links to Chanshare Sod Farms website, because I know you guys have so many great resources there that people can look up at any time, just as a refresher and a reminder. And I'm going to ask our listeners, I'm going to give them a little bit of a challenge, because here in Utah,
Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to water conservation. So I would love it if all of the listeners out there who are listening to us right now, if you know of one other person that you think, hey, maybe they could benefit from these water conservation tips, and that you think that this would be helpful to them, just hit that share button on Apple Podcast and you can send it over to them very easily. There's a little link that it'll send them. You can send it over on Apple Podcast or Spotify. So that's my little challenge to our listeners. Share this episode because, again, knowledge is power. And think about how many gallons of water you might save by sharing this information with a friend. So think of it that way, right? It's a good thing. Anyway, so Eric, we're talking, we wanted to talk a little bit about the differences in soils in Utah. Obviously, it can change dramatically from Sandy to Taylorsville. So, and you're going to want to water a little bit differently. So talk us through some of that.
Yeah, so soil will determine how much water your lawn can absorb in one cycle. So as I mentioned before, a rotor sprinkler will put on about 1/2 inch of water in an hour. And if you don't have the soil type that can absorb that much water in an hour, then you're going to start getting runoff. And that wastes water. Basically, that water just goes into the street or onto your driveway or whatever, and you're not using that efficiently. So what you want to do is make sure that you're watering for your soil type as well. So in Utah, we've got basically 3 types of soil. We've got sand, we've got loamy soil, and we've got clay soil. And an easy way, there's 2 ways that you can determine. You can take a soil sample and send it to like USU Extension Services or whatever, and they can tell you the type of soil that you have. If you want an easy way to figure that out, dig up about a palm-sized, a couple tablespoons of dirt and spit in it or put a little water in it, and then use your finger to roll that water in, work it into the soil. Now, if the soil doesn't ball up at all, then you've got sandy soil. If the soil produces like little round balls, like several little round balls, then you've got kind of a sandy loamy soil, which is the most desirable type of soil. And if the soil balls up into one big ball, then it's clay soil. Okay, so that's how you determine the type of soil that you have, an easy way for you to determine it. Now, sandy soil, that can absorb 1/2 inch to 1 inch of water per hour without runoff. Okay, so you can apply all of that on sandy soil without having to worry about runoff at all in one cycle. Now, if you got loamy soil or sandy loam soil, it can absorb anywhere between 1/4 to 1/2 inch of water per hour. So again, like we're trying to put 1/2 inch of water per cycle or per day watering onto our soil. And so if you've got sandy loam soil, then you're going to have to watch and make sure that it doesn't get runoff if you put that whole 1/2 inch on there. Okay. Now, clay soil is a lot more difficult. It actually bunches together and it makes it harder for the water to get down there. So clay soil will only absorb between 1/10 and 1/4 inch of water per hour. So if you've got clay soil and you want to put on a 1/2 inch, then you're going to have to run cycles back to back. So if you're running 3 stations on a night, you'll run those 3 stations for half an hour and then set another cycle to start immediately after that and run for another half hour in order to get that full 1/2 inch. Otherwise, you're going to have runoff. And so as you can see there, that's going to determine how long you can actually run your cycle for before you start getting runoff. And runoff is something that produces waste. So again, if you want to conserve water, make sure that you know the type of soil that you have. So again, we talked before about the different types of soil and how they can accept that water. And then the loamy soil, again, if you observe that you've got a station that isn't able to receive that 1/2 inch of water in one cycle, then cut your cycle in half and then run those cycles back to back, and that will produce the full thing. Now, another thing to think about with soil is compaction, because if your if your lawn is used a lot by pets, people, vehicles, whatever it may be, it'll compact that soil. And when that soil is compacted, air, water, and nutrients aren't able to get as easily down into the the root bed. And so aeration, especially in times of drought, aeration at least 2 times a year is really good. So if you haven't aerated yet, then aerate. Plug aeration is great. You leave the plugs on the grass because they'll break down and return the nutrients to the soil. And so I would suggest that if you haven't aerated this year, that you make sure you do it, and then you do it again towards the middle of the fall.
Okay, so it's even though we're getting past spring and closer to into summer, it's still okay to aerate this time of year.
Yeah, it's okay to aerate at any time of year because, again, what that does is it pulls soil plugs out, which loosens up the soil there. And if you have a clay-based soil, you're going to definitely need to aerate 2 times a year.
Yeah.
Optimal times are spring and fall. So like right at the beginning of the season and then towards the middle of the end of the season. But you can aerate at any time in order to lessen compaction.
That's great to know.
So now I want to talk a little bit about volume because a lot of times we talk about how many gallons go onto a lawn and that freaks people out, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're watering, if you're properly watering a 2,000 square foot lawn, 1 inch puts about 1,500 gallons, 1,500 gallons on there. And everybody thinks, oh no, 1,500 gallons. Because if you think about 1,500 gallons of milk, that's a lot of water, right?
Oh.
But to put that into perspective, the average person uses about 100 gallons of water during a day. And that's like taking showers, brushing teeth, using the bathroom, etc. So if you have a household of 4 people times 7 days, that's 2,800 gallons of water in a week that they're using for just basic household stuff, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, we want to conserve on the inside as well. We want to make sure that we're running our dishwashers when they're full, our washers when they're full, that we're not taking extremely long showers. Another way to conserve is to take showers instead of baths. Those are all things that you could do to decrease the amount of water that you're using inside your home. But again, if you're watering properly outside the home, a 2,000 square foot lawn will require 1,500 gallons. So in perspective, that's not really that much. And again, in Utah right now, the goal is to water no more than 2 times per week and to apply a 1/2 inch of water for each of those times that you water.
And it's so reasonable. And can we just talk about a little segue here? Why do people leave the water running when they brush their teeth?
Can I tell you what my problem is?
What?
Like I brush my teeth and I think that I'm done. And so I turn on the faucet to spit out my toothpaste. And then I realize, oh, maybe I should brush the back a little bit longer. And so then I turn it off and I brush the back. And then I'm about ready to spit out my toothpaste. And I'm like, oh, wait, did I get this good enough? And so then I go to the other side and I brush the other side and I've turned it on again and off and on and off and on and off. So sometimes that's why I leave it on.
But still,
I try not to.
I see these videos of people just brushing their teeth. It's like they physically can't do it unless the water's running. It's like, I got news for you. You can turn that off.
Yeah. Another thing to think about, like a lot of times, like before I get into a shower, I don't want to get into a cold shower. So I'll turn the shower on and let it run.
Yeah.
I've heard of people putting a 5-gallon bucket in their shower and catching that water.
That's a fantastic
I haven't
idea.
done it, but that's something that you could use. Like you can use that for secondary water on your plants or something like that.
Of course, fill your household watering bucket for your indoor plants, right? Something.
It ends up being gray water and it's clean. So why not?
Totally, that's a great idea. I'm going to make my husband do that from now on.
I'm sorry to your husband.
I know.
I suggest that you go like, we're doing this now. Oh no.
Where's the bucket? You cannot shower without a 5-gallon bucket in there.
How funny.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Okay, so I can't believe this, but we have 40 seconds left of this episode. I cannot believe it.
Wow.
So
here, let me put some numbers out real quick in this last 40 seconds, okay?
Boom.
A 2,000 square foot lawn, 1 inch a week is 1,500 gallons. So a 4,000 square foot lawn is 3,000 gallons. A 5,000 square foot lawn is 4,000 gallons. That's all you need. If you're putting any more than that, then you're putting on way too much.
I love it. Thanks for being here, Eric.
No problem. I'm glad to do it.
When you're ready to grow big or go home, make your neighbors green with envy. Get the Gardening in Utah podcast. Gardening Utah, Available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden.